Unit 1. The squirrel. The. It is not the. Okay. It is the. The squirrel. Squirrel. Not squirrel. It is squirrel. 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 Okay. The Squirrel by Mildred Bowers Armstrong. This short and beautiful poem talks about a squirrel, which is one of the most loving creatures found on earth. And in this poem, the poet describes the squirrel doing different sorts of activities, and the poet also describes the body shape, physical features, physical appearances of the squirrel, like the shape of its tail, the shape of its body, or the color of its fur, okay, which we will be talking about in the poem. So, in this poem is called The Squirrel by Mildred Bowers Armstrong. All right, now let's move on to the poem. He wore a question mark for tail and overcoat of grey. He sat up straight to eat a nut. Again, please pay attention to the words that I sometimes stress on. Okay, pay attention to the way I read, where I put certain stress on certain words. Ka lam dan, ka thiarik dan kha lo ngai tha ula, chuan thu mal chen khata ka thiar dan, ka lam rik dan, ka oki ka sanim, ka tinabikem, ka penabikem tiang tikha in lo ngai thadonya. Okay, now let's read. He wore a question mark for tail and overcoat of grey. He sat up straight to eat a nut. He wore, okay, W-O-R-E, wore. He wore okay, question, question. He wore a question mark. Di sound ka om turani. Mark. Atopa k sound ka om turani. Okay, because it's K. K sound shim to k. Din ang jantlang pui. He wore a question mark for tail. Tail. Okay. For and this one sound ka om turani. For tail. An overcoat of grey. An overcoat of grey. He sat up straight to eat a nut. Sat. Dito oh, sat nilogin sat. He sat up straight. The a and jan oh, s and yavangin straight to eat a nut. He wore a question mark for tail and overcoat of grey. He sat up straight to eat a nut. Now, the first 3 lines of the poem is this. He wore a question mark for tail and overcoat of grey. He sat up straight to eat a nut. Now, in these 3 first lines of the poem, the poet describes a squirrel who he found sitting on a tree and eating a nut. To the poet, the squirrel seemed to have a tail which is shaped like a question mark. We all know the shape of a question mark, so I don't think I need to explain this part. And the poet also says that this squirrel has a gray colored skin or fur which is covered all over his body. Okay, the poet says that this squirrel is gray in color and its hair, fur is hair. Okay, its hair or fur is gray in color. He poem yan azyak tu poem, okay, not poem. This poem ziak tu shim tu poet kan ti P-O-E-T, poet. Poem ziak tu tu poet ani, okay. And hemi poem ziak tu poet hianin squirrel tu thelei chitin reng kan shet kha. Thelei amua chu thelei chu nut chu badam kan ti ang hi. Badam ei tur a ei do na piangin amo thil a ei do na piangin a thungil at zelani atini mo chuanin an overcoat of grey. Second line na an overcoat of grey ati chu overcoat chu kan sia coat chu kan shet kha mo thom no ni overcoat chu coat aya sei shet he kan khup chen te ang kha coat sei chi kan ti ang kha overcoat ani chuan poet hianin enga tinge squirrel hi overcoat aha ati omzia chu overcoat tak tak kha chu ani tina ni lovin hemi poem a hian squirrel chu kan sia a ran chikhat ani tro thelei ani thelei chitin reng squirrel ti mizo tong chuan thelei ti nia thelei a po chi sang sang anoma masikhami aming thelei tia khanin an tel vek ani chuan thelei kan mu theu tawanga thomhno an hangai lo ni tro an mani chu mul an nei ani fur kan ti ang kha mul chu ni rong chi sang sang anoma a chen chu chochi bu pol gray kan ti hi chochi bu pol rong mo chochi bu pol rong emo a uk angte brown color te an chini ni chuan hemi thelei amu hemi poetina thelei amu hi chu gray color chochi bu pol rong ani mo chuan an overcoat of gray ati chu thelei hi amul chochi bu pol rong hlirin a khata amo ataksa rong chu amo amul rong chu chochi bu pol rong ani ati na ni chu okay. And he wore a question mark for tail ati chu a mei in mu to chan thelei in mu to nga a mei in mu chuanin question mark shape ang hianin a in shape ani ati okay. Now let's move on to the next lines. He liked to tease and play, and if we ran around his tree, he went the other way. Now let's read it again, and please listen closely to how I read certain words, my pronunciations, and the way I read it, okay? He liked to tease and play, and if we ran around his tree, he went the other way. Tease, T-E-A-S-E, tease, ti chu chai tina, okay? He liked to tease and play, and if we ran around his tree, he went the other way. Now in these 3 lines of the poem, the poet describes the squirrel as a fun-loving and naughty creature. In fiam nom ti deuh, mi chai nom ti deuh, ma se chi mom deuh si atini. Okay, in this the poet says that the squirrel enjoyed playing, enjoyed having fun, but is also a very naughty creature. And if we run around his tree, the squirrel would go the other way. zia chu infiam nom ti deuh sin mi chai nom ti deuh si khanin abul hnaya kan vakal chuanin kan omlo na lama min tlan chhiat san dai zel ani ati thelei kan mu cheu to anga an mani vanai kan tum hianin ran emo mishing te emo an hlau thin ani tro tiang khanin vanai kan tum apiang khanin min fiamin min chai zok zok ma se abul hnaya va amo abul hnaya vakal kan tum khanin min tlan chhiat san dai zel ani ati okay in this the poet says that the squirrel, even though he enjoyed having fun, even though he enjoyed playing with people, whenever people or whenever animals or other living creatures go towards him, he would run away because he was afraid of other people. Do you understand? Okay, I'll read it again, and please pay close attention to the way I read. He liked to tease and play, and if we ran around his tree, he went the other way. Okay, now let's read the whole poem together again. He wore a question mark for tail and overcoat of grey. He sat up straight to eat a nut. He liked to tease and play, and if we ran around his tree, he went the other way. So, in this poem, the poet says that this squirrel, this lovable, playful squirrel, is grey in color. Its fur, its hair on its body, or on his body, is grey in color, and his tail is shaped like a question mark. And whenever he is about to eat anything or a nut, he would usually sit up straight. And this lovable creature enjoys playing with other people, enjoys teasing other people. But whenever people or animals try to go and play with the squirrel or try to go and get close to the squirrel would run away from other people because he was afraid. That is what the whole poem is about. So the poet found the squirrel to be quite amusing. Lomom atinitu. Okay, the poet thinks that the squirrel, with its question mark shaped tail, its fur being grey in color, and him, as in the squirrel, sitting up straight whenever he is about to eat anything, or the squirrel teasing people, playing with people, but being afraid to be close to other people. All this the poet thinks is amusing. He found it to be amusing. Lomom atinitu. Okay. Now, there's one important thing that I would like to highlight. In this whole poem, the poet describes the squirrel as a person. He, the among zelani. He, atia, he, heta. He wore a question mark for tail. He, atia. He sat up straight to eat a nut. Atilea. He liked to tease and play. And if we ran around his tree, he went the other way. And in the second line of the poem, an overcoat of grey, the asoiteleni. So in this whole poem, hemi poem chung hianin, poem tlaruk hianin, poet aziak tu hemi poem ziak tu hianin, squirrel hi mishing anga yani tu. Okay, he, his tiangte, wearing an overcoat of grey at tiangte, hengho hi mishing anga angay avangin, he emo his tiangin aron tar langani. Usually mipa ani chuanin he ting kan mangani tro mipa no pang emo mipa pakhat ani chuan he his ti kan mangani nu pakhat emo me cheno pang pakhat ani chuan her amo she kan ting kan mang tlang puyani ran nung emo ran sa emo nun na nei lo ang shim hi it ti kan mang tlang puyani. Okay, but hemi poem a hian aziak tu poet hianin hi ti aron mangtlat ani squirrel chu ransa ani kan soi to ang khan ran nungte ransa te tenganga hian I ti it ti hi atlang puin kan mangani ma se hemi poem a hianin poet hian hi angin mishing mipa angin aron tar langani chumi hi ti aron man na chu a aron man chan chu subject chuan personification ti nani okay personification 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 a omzia chu mishing angaya chu wang chuanin hemi poem chu pumpuya hian tlaruka hian mipa angin a chua ani mishing angin aron tar langani a chan chu hemi poem tingai nom tu atanin hi mishing mipa angin aron tar langani okay it ti pona mangthei ma se a poem hi ti interesting tu tingai nom tu le zual atana atar lan theinan hi mishing angin mipa angin aron tar langani okay. Before we end, let me read the whole poem again, and please read it, try to read it along with me, okay? He wore a question mark for tail and overcoat of grey. He sat up straight to eat a nut. He liked to tease and play, and if we ran around his tree, he went the other way. All right, and that is the end of the lesson.